A little boy stumbled out of the woods onto a dark highway crying and barefoot. He ran straight to 5 black SUVs and grabbed at the door handles. "Please follow me home," he begged, his voice shaking. The men in suits looked at each other, then followed him down a dirt road into the darkness. They had no idea their lives were about to change forever. The sun was dying behind the hills when Vincent saw the boy. At first he thought it was a deer, something small and fast darting between the pine trees that lined Route 47. But deer don't scream. "Stop!" Vincent's voice cut through the low rumble of 5 luxury SUVs. The convoy came to a sudden halt, tires crunching on gravel. Dust swirled around them like smoke. Vincent stepped out of the lead vehicle, adjusting his tailored Italian suit. His silver hair caught the last light of day. Behind him, 4 more men emerged from their SUVs, their faces confused, annoyed. They were dressed in dark suits, polished shoes, men who commanded respect through presence alone. "What the hell, Vincent?" Marco called out, loosening his tie. His dark eyes scanned the tree line with the wariness of a man who'd survived decades in their world. Vincent didn't answer. He was already moving toward the trees. The boy stumbled out from the pines. He couldn't have been more than 9 years old. His face was streaked with tears and dirt, his clothes torn at the knees. He was barefoot, his feet were bleeding. "Please," the boy's voice cracked. "Please, you have to help." Vincent knelt down, his expensive suit jacket creaking slightly. "Hey kid, slow down. What's wrong?" "My mom. She won't wake up." The boy grabbed Vincent's lapels with both hands, his fingers shaking. "Please follow me home, please, I don't know what to do." The other men exchanged glances. This wasn't in the plan. They'd just finished a 12-hour meeting with their associates upstate, finalizing territory agreements and profit distributions. Everyone was tired, hungry, ready to hit their usual spot in the city and call it a night. But something in the boy's eyes stopped them cold. "Where's home, son?" Vincent asked gently. The boy pointed down a dirt path that split off from the main road. It disappeared into thick woods, barely visible in the fading light. "How far?" 10 minutes? Maybe less if we run." The boy's voice was desperate, rising. "But I can't carry her, I tried. She's too heavy and Lily is too scared to come out and I don't have a phone and—" "Okay. Vincent put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "We'll follow you, but you're riding with me. Those feet aren't taking you anywhere." The boy nodded frantically. Vincent looked back at his crew. Marco, his consigliere, was already nodding. Anthony, the youngest at 23, looked uncertain. Sal, the enforcer with the scarred face, cracked his knuckles. The others, Polly, Frankie, Leo, and Danny, stood silent beside their vehicles, waiting for Vincent's call. "We follow the kid," Vincent said simply. "Something's wrong. Could be a setup," Frankie muttered. He was the paranoid one. Always had been. Spent too many years in places where trust got you killed. "Set up for what?" Sal growled. "Kid's barefoot and bleeding." "Look at him." "I'm just saying, we follow," Vincent repeated, his voice harder now. "Anyone got a problem with that? Turn around. No one's stopping you." Nobody moved. Vincent lifted the boy into the passenger seat of his SUV, settling him carefully. "What's your name?" "Ethan." "All right, Ethan, hold on tight. You're going to show us where to go." The convoy roared back to life. Ethan pointed, and Vincent turned down the dirt path. The others followed in formation, their headlights cutting through the growing darkness. The path was rougher than it looked. Tree roots buckled the ground. Branches scraped against pristine black paint and chrome. After 5 minutes, Marco pulled up beside Vincent through the open window. "This doesn't feel right," Marco said, his voice barely audible over the engines. Vincent knew what he meant. The deeper they went, the more isolated it became. No streetlights, no houses, just trees and darkness pressing in from all sides. Ethan suddenly pointed. "There. That's it." Ahead, barely visible through the trees, was a farmhouse. It might have been white once, but now the paint was peeling like dead skin. The porch sagged in the middle. One window was covered with cardboard. The yard was overgrown with weeds taller than Ethan. The men killed their engines. The silence was immediate and heavy. Vincent helped Ethan down. The boy ran toward the house, then stopped, turning back with panic in his eyes. "Hurry, please." The 5 men moved as one, following Ethan up the broken porch steps. Their tailored suits and polished shoes looked absurdly out of place in this setting. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. It wasn't locked. It wasn't even fully closed. Inside, the smell hit them first. Stale air, unwashed clothes, something sour and sharp that made Anthony gag. The living room was a disaster. Dirty dishes piled on every surface, clothes scattered across the floor, and on a sagging brown couch, slumped against the armrest, was a woman. She was thin, too thin. Her skin was pale gray in the dim light. Her hair hung in greasy strands across her face. Her chest rose and fell, but barely. "Mom." Ethan ran to her, shaking her shoulder. "Mom, wake up. I brought help." She didn't respond. Marco was already kneeling beside her, his fingers on her neck, checking her pulse. He'd been a combat medic in the army before Vincent brought him into the family. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, tilting her head back, checking her breathing. "She's alive," Marco said, "but her pulse is weak, really weak." "What happened to her?" Vincent asked Ethan. "I don't know." Tears streamed down the boy's face. "She was fine this morning. Then she got really tired. She said she just needed to rest, but then she wouldn't wake up." Sal moved through the house, his heavy footsteps thudding on the warped floorboards. He disappeared down a hallway. "Vincent." Anthony's voice was quiet. He was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, his face pale. "You need to see this." Vincent walked over. The kitchen was worse than the living room. The sink was full of dishes covered in mold. The trash can overflowed onto the floor. But that wasn't what Anthony was showing him. He was pointing at the cupboards. All of them were open. All of them were empty. Not a single can of food. Not a box of cereal. Nothing. "They've got no food," Anthony whispered. "Nothing." A crash came from the back of the house. Everyone spun around. "It's okay," Sal called out. "Just found the sister." He emerged from the hallway carrying a little girl who couldn't have been older than 6. She was wrapped in a dirty blanket, her eyes wide with terror. She was shaking. "She was hiding under the bed," Sal said softly, his massive arms cradling her like she weighed nothing. "Won't talk, just keep staring." Vincent's jaw tightened. He'd seen a lot in his 52 years, done things he wasn't proud of, lived through things most people couldn't imagine. But this hit different. "Where's your dad, Ethan?" Vincent asked, keeping his voice calm. Ethan's face crumpled. "He left 4 days ago. He said he was going to buy cigarettes. He didn't come back." 4 days? Marco looked up from the mother. "You've been alone for 4 days?" Ethan nodded, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "Mom kept saying he'd be back. She kept waiting, but then she ran out of her medicine and she got sick and..." His voice broke. "I didn't know what to do. Lily was so hungry. I gave her the last can of soup yesterday. Then there was nothing left." The men stood frozen in the ruined house. 5 hardened criminals suddenly faced with something none of them were prepared for. Vincent looked at the unconscious mother, at the terrified little girl in Sal's arms, at Ethan, who'd run into a road and flagged down strangers because he had no one else. "Marco," Vincent said quietly, "can you help her?" Marco was already reaching for his phone. Then he stopped, looking at the screen. No signal. "Of course there isn't." "Frankie," Vincent muttered. Vincent made a decision. "All right, here's what we do. Marco, you stay with the mother. Keep her stable. Sal, you and Anthony take my car and get back to town. Find a doctor who will come out here. Don't take no for an answer." "And the rest of us?" Polly asked. Vincent looked at Ethan and Lily, 2 kids who'd been abandoned and forgotten, left to survive on their own in a house with no food and a dying mother. "We stay," Vincent said. "We don't leave them alone, not tonight." Nobody argued. Whatever they'd been expecting when they left that meeting this morning, it wasn't this. But here they were, and something told Vincent that this night was just the beginning. The first hour crawled by like a wounded animal. Marco worked on the mother while the others searched the house. What they found made Vincent's blood run cold. In the bathroom, Leo discovered a collection of orange pill bottles scattered across the counter. He brought them to Marco, who read the labels with growing concern. Antidepressants, anxiety medication, pain pills. Marco shook his head. "Some of these are months old." She hasn't been refilling them. Why not? Vincent asked. Marco held up one bottle, showing him the price sticker still attached. $160 without insurance. He gestured at the other bottles. She's probably been choosing between medicine and food. And the father chose cigarettes and never came back, Frankie said darkly from the doorway. In the mother's bedroom, Paulie found something that made him call for Vincent. Inside a shoebox under the bed were past due notices. Electric bill, 3 months overdue. Water bill, 2 months. Property tax notice stamped in red. Final warning. But it was the envelope at the bottom that stopped Vincent cold. Inside was a single photograph, a family picture, maybe 2 years old. The mother looked healthy then, smiling. The father stood beside her, tall, broad-shouldered with cold eyes, even in a happy photo. Ethan and Lily were tiny, grinning at the camera. On the back, someone had written in shaky handwriting, "Before everything fell apart." Vincent slipped the photo back and returned to the living room. Ethan sat on the floor beside his mother, holding her hand. Lily had finally allowed herself to be set down, but she stayed pressed against Sal's leg, clutching his expensive trousers with small fists. "Ethan," Vincent said gently, sitting across from him, "I need you to tell me what happened. All of it." The boy's lip trembled. Dad lost his job last year at the warehouse. He started drinking more. Him and Mom fought all the time. He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. He hit her sometimes. When he was real mad, Vincent's hands clenched into fists. Beside him, Frankie's jaw tightened. Mom got sad after that. Ethan continued. Real sad. She stopped going places, stopped cooking. Dad said she was weak, that she needed to get over it. Tears rolled down his cheeks. Then 4 days ago they had the biggest fight ever. He said he was done, said we were dragging him down. He took his truck and left. Did he take anything with him? Marco asked. Ethan nodded. The money jar, it had like $300 in it. Mom was saving it for Lily's medicine. She gets sick a lot. As if on cue, Lily coughed. A wet, rattling sound that made Marco's head snap up. How long has she been coughing like that? 2 weeks, maybe, Ethan said. Mom said we'd take her to the doctor when Dad came back with money. Vincent stood up and walked to the front porch, needing air. Leo followed him out. They stood in silence, watching the darkness beyond the porch light. Moths circled overhead, throwing strange shadows. I've got a daughter, Leo said quietly. He rarely spoke about his past. She's 20 now. I haven't seen her in 8 years. Vincent glanced at him. I was a lousy father, Leo continued. Drunk most of the time, mean the rest of it. Her mother finally kicked me out. Best thing she ever did. He lit a cigarette, his hands shaking slightly. These kids, they remind me of what I put my little girl through. Before Vincent could respond, Paulie stuck his head out the door. Sal and Anthony are back with a doctor. The doctor was a woman in her 50s carrying a leather bag that looked older than Ethan. Her name was Dr. Martinez, and she didn't flinch at the sight of 5 men in expensive suits crowded into the tiny house. She examined the mother in silence, checking her vitals, her eyes, her pulse. Then she turned to Marco. You stabilized her? Yes, ma'am. Good work. She's severely malnourished and dehydrated. She also missed several doses of her medications, which caused her blood sugar to crash. Dr. Martinez pulled out an IV kit. I can hydrate her and give her something to stabilize her, but she needs to be in a hospital. Will she be okay? Ethan's voice was small. Dr. Martinez's expression softened. If we get her help, yes. But son, I need to ask you something. Where are your other relatives, grandparents, aunts, uncles? Ethan shook his head. Mom's parents died before I was born. Dad's family doesn't talk to us. He said they were dead to him. Dr. Martinez and Vincent exchanged a look. I have to report this, the doctor said quietly. These children can't stay here alone. Child services will need to be involved. No. Ethan jumped up, his face panicked. They'll take us away. They'll split us up. I heard kids at school talking about foster care. They said brothers and sisters get separated. He ran to Vincent, grabbing his jacket just like he had on the road. Please don't let them take Lily. She needs me. I'm all she has. Lily, hearing her name, began to cry. Not loud, but a quiet, hopeless sound that was somehow worse. Vincent looked around at his crew, at Leo, haunted by his own failures as a father, at Marco, still kneeling beside the mother, at Sal, who was gently patting Lily's back, at Polly, Frankie, Danny, and Anthony, all of them watching him waiting. They were criminals. Made men, some of them. Men with blood on their hands and secrets buried deep. Not the kind of people the system trusted. But right now, they were all these kids had. Doc, Vincent said slowly, what if they weren't alone? What if someone stayed with them until the mother recovered? Dr. Martinez raised an eyebrow. You mean you? I mean us. A long silence fell over the room. Then Sal spoke up, his voice surprisingly gentle. I'm in. Yeah, Marco added. Me too. One by one, the others nodded. Dr. Martinez looked at them for a long moment. These rough men in designer suits and Italian leather now promising to watch over 2 abandoned children. I'll give you tonight, she finally said. But tomorrow we figure out a real solution. Understood? Vincent nodded. Understood. As Dr. Martinez worked on the mother, the men settled in for a long night. They had entered this broken house as strangers. But somehow, in the span of a few hours, they'd become something else. Guardians. Protectors. A family that nobody expected. The mother woke up at 3 a.m. Vincent was dozing in a chair by the window when he heard her gasp. Marco was at her side instantly, his instincts sharp even after minimal sleep. Easy, Marco said softly. You're okay. Just breathe. Her eyes darted around the room, wild with confusion and fear. Then she saw Ethan asleep on the floor beside the couch, wrapped in someone's suit jacket. Her face crumbled. Ethan, she whispered, reaching for him with a shaking hand. He's fine, Vincent said, moving closer. Your boy saved your life. He flagged us down on the highway. She looked at Vincent, really looked at him, taking in the expensive watch on his wrist, the tailored suit, the commanding presence. Fear flickered across her face. Who are you? Some guys passing through, Vincent said. Your son needed help. We helped. Where's... She stopped, her voice catching. Where's my husband? The question hung in the air like smoke. He's not here, Marco said carefully. Ethan said he left 4 days ago. Something broke in her expression. Not surprise, just a deep, bone-tired acceptance, like she'd been waiting for this confirmation. He's not coming back, is he? Her voice was barely audible. Nobody answered. They didn't need to. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her hollow cheeks. I knew. I think I always knew. But I kept telling the kids. I kept saying he'd come back. Ma'am? Vincent started. Claire, she interrupted. My name is Claire. Claire, Vincent said gently. You've been really sick. Dr. Martinez came by. She said you need proper medical care. Claire's eyes snapped open. A doctor? How are we going to pay for a doctor? We don't have insurance, we don't have anything. Panic rose in her voice. Oh God. The bills, the house, the kids. Claire, stop. Marco put a hand on her shoulder. Right now, you need to focus on getting better. We'll figure out the rest. You don't understand, they'll take my babies. Claire tried to sit up, but she was too weak. If they find out Robert left, if they know I can't take care of them, they'll take them away from me. Nobody's taking anybody. Sal rumbled from the doorway. Lily was asleep against his chest, her small body rising and falling with his breaths. Claire stared at the massive, scarred man holding her daughter with such gentleness, and fresh tears came. Why are you helping us? She asked. You don't even know us. Vincent thought about that question. Why were they here? They could have called 911 from the road and left. They could have dropped the kids at a fire station and disappeared. That's what smart people would have done. But none of them had even suggested it. Because your son asked us to, Vincent said simply. And he was brave enough to trust strangers when he had no other choice. Seemed wrong to let him down. Outside, dawn was starting to break. The other men were scattered around the property. Polly checking the perimeter. Frankie trying to get the ancient well pump working. Danny and Anthony attempting to fix the sagging porch steps with whatever scraps they'd found in the barn. Leo walked in carrying grocery bags. He'd left in his car an hour ago without a word. Now he unpacked bread, milk, eggs, peanut butter, apples. 24-hour diner 20 miles down the highway, he explained, avoiding everyone's eyes. Figured the kids would need breakfast. Claire watched him stock the empty cupboards, her lips trembling. I can't pay you back. I don't have money for groceries. Didn't ask you to pay, Leo said gruffly. Ethan stirred, woken by the voices. He sat up, saw his mother awake, and scrambled to her side. Mom, you're okay. Oh, baby. Claire pulled him close, breathing in the smell of his hair. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's okay, Ethan said, but his voice was tight with tears he'd been holding back for days. You're awake now. Everything's going to be okay. Vincent stepped out onto the porch, needing air. Marco followed. They stood watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. It would have been beautiful if the situation wasn't so ugly. We got a problem, Marco said quietly. I know. Dr. Martinez is going to report this. She has to. And when child services shows up, Marco trailed off. We're criminals, Vincent. Made men, half of us. They're not going to let us anywhere near these kids once the system gets involved. I know, Vincent repeated. They'll separate them. Ethan and Lily, different foster homes. Probably. Marco's voice was tight. Claire will lose custody. She's got no job, no husband, no support system. The state will take them, and that'll be that. Vincent's hands gripped the porch railing. So what do you want me to do, Marco? We can't kidnap them, we can't hide them, and we sure as hell can't adopt them ourselves. I'm not saying I have answers, Marco shot back. I'm just saying we made those kids a promise last night. And come tomorrow, we're going to break it. The front door creaked open. Ethan stood there, his small frame silhouetted in the doorway. Are you leaving? His voice was small, scared. Vincent turned. No, son. We're not leaving. But I heard you talking about tomorrow, about people coming to take us. Damn. The kid had been listening. Ethan walked onto the porch, his bare feet careful on the broken boards. He looked up at Vincent with eyes that had seen too much for 9 years old. My dad used to make promises, Ethan said quietly. He promised he'd stop drinking, promised he'd stop hitting Mom, promised he'd get better. His voice cracked. He promised he wouldn't leave us. Vincent crouched down to Ethan's level. I'm not your dad. I know. Ethan wiped his nose. But grown-ups always leave. That's what they do. Something twisted in Vincent's chest. He thought about Leo's daughter, who probably said the same thing about him. About all the promises broken in his own life. About all the people he'd let down. Listen to me, Vincent said firmly. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I can't promise you everything's going to be perfect. But I can promise you this. We're not going to let them split you and Lily up. And we're not going to let anybody hurt you. You understand? How? Ethan asked. How can you stop them? Vincent stood up, looking at Marco, then back at the boy. I don't know yet, he admitted. But we're going to figure it out. Inside the house, Lily started crying. Claire's weak voice tried to comfort her. Sal's deep rumble joined in, and somehow, impossibly, the little girl's cries turned to giggles. Ethan's eyes widened. Lily's laughing. She hasn't laughed in weeks. Marco and Vincent exchanged a glance. Maybe they couldn't fix everything. Maybe the system would win in the end. But right now, in this moment, they'd given these kids something they desperately needed. Hope. And Vincent would be damned if he let that die without a fight. By nightfall, the farmhouse looked almost livable. The men had worked through the day like men possessed. Frankie fixed the water pump, cursing and bleeding knuckles until it finally coughed to life. Polly and Danny patched the roof where rain had been leaking into Lily's bedroom. Anthony cleaned out the kitchen until it no longer smelled like death. Claire watched from the couch, too weak to do much but cry quietly at their kindness. Dr. Martinez returned at dusk to check on her. The doctor's expression was unreadable as she took in the transformed house, the stocked cupboards, the children eating peanut butter sandwiches at a table that had been scrubbed clean. I made the call, Dr. Martinez said quietly to Vincent on the porch. Child services will be here tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Vincent's jaw tightened. And then what? They'll assess the situation, interview Claire, check the house. She paused. Look, I know what you're trying to do here, but these children need stability, a support system. Claire needs psychiatric care, consistent medication, and a path back to employment. That's not something you can provide with good intentions and elbow grease. So we just hand them over? I'm saying the system exists for a reason. Dr. Martinez's voice softened. I know it's not perfect, but it's better than 2 kids living in poverty with a mother who can't care for them and a father who's a coward. Vincent finished. Yeah, we got that part. Dr. Martinez left them with that truth hanging in the air. As darkness fell, the men gathered around a fire pit in the backyard. Someone had found firewood. Someone else had found marshmallows at the convenience store. Lily sat on Sal's lap, her small hands sticky with melted sugar. Ethan leaned against Vincent, fighting sleep. Inside, Claire had finally drifted off, exhausted from her first real meal in days. So what's the plan? Paulie asked, breaking the silence. We're just going to let them take the kids tomorrow? What choice do we have? Anthony said. His young face looked older in the firelight. We can't fight the government. The hell we can't, Frankie muttered. And say what? Marco challenged. That 5 made men want to babysit someone else's kids? They'll laugh us out of the county. Danny spoke up, his voice quiet. My sister works in family services, over in Newark. She told me once that they always try to keep families together. It's the first priority. But they need to see a support structure, someone who can help the parent get back on their feet. Claire doesn't have anyone, Leo said. That's the whole problem. No, Vincent said slowly, an idea forming. She's got us. Everyone turned to look at him. Think about it, Vincent continued. We do community work, donations to churches, youth centers, veterans programs. It's how we maintain our standing in the neighborhoods we operate in. So? Frankie asked. So we make this our new project. Vincent's voice gained confidence. We tell child services we're a support network. We'll help with repairs, groceries, transportation to appointments. We'll make sure Claire has what she needs to get better. We'll prove the kids don't need to be taken away because their mother isn't alone anymore. Marco stared at him. You're serious. Dead serious. Vincent, Marco said carefully. That's not a weekend project, that's a commitment. Months, maybe years. That means regular check-ins, background checks, social worker visits. That means showing up when it's not convenient, when it's boring, when it's hard. Vincent looked around the fire at his crew. At Leo, who'd abandoned his own daughter. At Sal, who'd spent 10 years in prison for nearly killing 3 men in a bar fight. At Paulie, who had anger issues that ended his marriage. At Frankie, who trusted no one. At Danny and Anthony, both running from pasts they never talked about. Broken men, all of them. Men who'd made mistakes. Men who'd hurt people. But also men who'd spent the last 24 hours fixing a house for strangers. Who'd bought groceries they could easily afford but never thought to buy. Who'd held crying children and made promises they had no business making. I'm not saying we're going to be perfect, Vincent said. I'm saying we're going to try, and maybe that's enough. It won't be easy, Marco warned. Nothing worth doing is. Sal cleared his throat. Everyone looked at the giant man who rarely spoke. Lily had fallen asleep in his arms, her thumb in her mouth, completely trusting. I vote yes, Sal said simply. This little girl needs us. I'm in, Leo said immediately. One by one, the others nodded. Even Frankie after a long pause. We're going to need a better pitch than trust us, we're businessmen, Marco said. Child services aren't going to be impressed by good intentions. Then we show them more than intentions, Vincent said. Tomorrow morning we show them results. They spent the next 3 hours planning. Marco would handle the medical angle, explaining Claire's conditions and treatment plan. Danny would contact his sister for inside advice on what social workers look for. Paulie would document all the repairs they'd done with photos and receipts. Anthony would research local resources, food banks, counseling services, job training programs. Vincent would talk to Claire and convince her to fight. Around midnight, the others drifted off to sleep. Some on the porch, some in their cars. Sal in the barn with Lily still clinging to him like a koala. Vincent found Ethan sitting alone on the back steps, staring at the stars. Can't sleep? Vincent asked, sitting beside him. I'm scared about tomorrow, Ethan admitted. Me too, son. Ethan looked up at him, surprised. Really? Really? Vincent put an arm around the boy's thin shoulders. But you know what? I spent my whole life being scared. Scared to change, scared to commit. Scared to care about anything more than business and my next deal. He squeezed gently. Then you ran out of those trees and grabbed my jacket. And for the first time in 20 years, I was more scared of letting you down than I was of trying. What if they don't listen? Ethan whispered. What if they take us anyway? Vincent didn't lie to him. He'd learned that much. Then we'll figure out plan B, and plan C, and plan D if we have to. But we won't stop fighting. That's the promise. Ethan leaned against him, and Vincent felt the boy's shoulders shake with silent tears. All the fear and exhaustion and trauma of the past days finally breaking through. It's okay, Vincent said quietly. Let it out. You've been strong for so long. You don't have to be strong right now. They sat there under the stars, a hardened criminal and a broken boy, both trying to believe that tomorrow might be different. Inside the house, Claire lay awake, listening to the sound of grown men in expensive suits sleeping on her porch and in their luxury cars in her yard. Strangers who'd become guardians, criminals who'd become angels. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, she wasn't facing it alone. The social worker arrived in a white sedan at exactly 9 a.m. Her name was Patricia Morrison, and she looked exactly like someone who'd spent 20 years dealing with the worst humanity had to offer. Tired eyes, sensible shoes, a clipboard that might as well have been a weapon. She stopped short when she saw 5 luxury SUVs parked in the overgrown driveway. Vincent stepped off the porch to meet her. He'd put on a fresh suit, simple and understated. It didn't help much. He still looked like exactly what he was. Ms. Morrison, I'm Vincent Costello. We spoke on the phone with Dr. Martinez. Patricia's hand moved instinctively toward her pepper spray. You're the businessman. Yes, ma'am. I was told there was one of you staying with the family temporarily. Her eyes swept over the vehicles, the men emerging from the house and barn. Not 5. Plans changed, Vincent said evenly. We'd like to talk to you about the children's situation. I'm not here to talk to you, Mr. Costello. I'm here to assess the welfare of 2 minors. She moved past him toward the house. Inside, Claire sat on the couch with Lily on her lap, and Ethan pressed against her side. Marco stood nearby, looking professional in a crisp white shirt he'd had delivered from the city. The house was clean, the cupboards stocked, the children fed and dressed in the cleanest clothes they owned. Patricia's expression didn't change as she surveyed the scene. Mrs. Turner, I'm Patricia Morrison from Child Protective Services. I need to ask you some questions. The interview was brutal. Patricia asked about Robert's abandonment, Claire's medical history, her psychiatric medications, her employment status, her support network. Claire answered truthfully, her voice shaking, tears streaming down her face as she admitted to everything. The abuse, the poverty, the day she couldn't get out of bed. Ethan held his mother's hand through all of it. Patricia took notes without emotion. Then she asked to speak with the children privately. No, Ethan said immediately. It's okay, baby, Claire whispered. It's not okay. Ethan's voice rose. You're going to take us away. I know you are. Patricia's expression softened slightly. The first crack in her armor. Ethan, I need to make sure you and your sister are safe. That's my job. I just want to talk. We are safe, Ethan insisted. We're safe now. Because of them. He pointed at the men standing awkwardly in the kitchen doorway. Patricia followed his gesture, taking in the 5 men in suits who looked like they'd walked out of a mob film. The gentlemen made you feel safe? They saved Mom's life. They brought us food. They fixed our house. Ethan's voice was fierce. They didn't have to help us, but they did. And they're not leaving. Patricia wrote something on her clipboard. I'll need to speak with them as well. She interviewed each man separately in the kitchen. Vincent went first. Mr. Costello, what exactly is your relationship to this family? We met them 2 days ago. The boy flagged us down on the highway. And you decided to stay? Yes, ma'am. Why? Vincent met her eyes. Because they needed help and we could give it. That's not a relationship. That's not family. That's strangers playing hero. Patricia's voice was sharp. These children need stability, consistency, not businessmen who are going to get bored and disappear. We're not going anywhere. You say that now. Everyone says that. Do you know how many times I've heard we'll take care of them from people who disappear within a week? She leaned forward. These are children, Mr. Costello. Not a charity project. It's not a way to feel good about yourselves. Vincent's hands clenched under the table. You're right. We are strangers. We have complicated pasts. We're not the obvious choice. He took a breath. But we're here. We showed up. And we're going to keep showing up. For how long? However long it takes. Patricia interviewed Marco next, then Sal, then the others. By the time she finished, it was past noon. She asked to inspect the house, the bedrooms, the kitchen, the bathroom. She checked the water, the electricity, the food supply. She made notes about everything. Finally, she sat down with Claire again. Mrs. Turner, I'm going to be honest with you. This situation is unusual. Patricia chose her words carefully. Your children have been living in neglectful conditions. You have untreated mental health issues. You have no income and no immediate family support. Under normal circumstances, I would recommend immediate removal of the children pending investigation. Claire's face crumbled. Lily began to cry. Ethan stood up, his small body shaking with rage and fear. However, Patricia continued, raising a hand. The circumstances have changed significantly in 48 hours. The house is habitable. The children are fed and healthy, aside from Lily's cough, which Dr. Martinez is treating. And you appear to have acquired a support system. Hope flickered across Claire's face. Does that mean... It means I'm not removing the children today? Patricia's voice was firm. But this is temporary. I will be conducting follow-up visits weekly at first. The house must remain in this condition. The children must have consistent food, clothing, and medical care. You must restart your psychiatric treatment and attend counseling. And these men, she gestured toward the crew, they need to prove they're serious. How do we do that? Vincent asked from the doorway. Patricia stood, gathering her things. By still being here a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now. She looked at each man in turn. Because talk is cheap, Mr. Costello, and children's lives are not. She handed Claire a stack of papers. Resources, food banks, counseling services, job training programs. Use them. Then she walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused and turned back. I hope you understand what you're taking on, Patricia said quietly. Because if you fail, if any of you disappear, if this house slides back into chaos, she paused. I won't hesitate. Those children will be placed in foster care, possibly separated. That's the reality. We understand, Vincent said. Patricia nodded once and left. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Lily climbed down from Claire's lap, walked over to Sal and raised her arms. He picked her up and she wrapped her small arms around his neck. You stayed, she whispered. Her first words since they'd arrived. Sal's scarred face softened. Yeah, little one. We stayed. Outside, they watched Patricia's car disappear down the road. Well, Frankie said, that was terrifying. She's right, though, Marco added. We can't mess this up. Vincent looked at the farmhouse, still shabby, still broken but standing, like the family inside it, like the men surrounding it. Then we won't, he said simply. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was the only one they had. 3 days later, Robert Turner walked into McCarthy's bar on the edge of town. Word spread fast in small communities. By the time the sun set, half the town knew he was back. By the time Vincent's phone rang, the whole crew knew too. You sure it's him? Vincent asked Polly, who'd gotten the call from a bartender who owed him a favor. Tall guy, brown jacket, driving a beat-up Ford with a dent in the passenger door, bragging about a poker win in Atlantic City. Polly's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. It's him. Vincent looked at the farmhouse. Through the window, he could see Claire helping Ethan with homework at the kitchen table. Lily was coloring on the floor, Sal watching over her like a scarred guardian angel. Where is he now? Still at McCarthy's, getting drunk on what's probably his kid's grocery money. Vincent's jaw clenched. Get the others. But nobody does anything stupid. We just talk. Talk. Polly repeated flatly. That's what I said. McCarthy's bar was the kind of place where fights started and questions weren't asked. Dark wood, darker lighting, and the smell of stale beer and broken dreams. Robert Turner sat at the bar, laughing too loud, his arm around a woman who wasn't his wife. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that might have been handsome before bitterness and alcohol carved lines into it. He didn't notice the 5 men in suits walk in until Vincent sat down next to him. Robert Turner. Vincent's voice was conversational. Robert turned, his eyes bleary. Who's asking? Someone who's been staying at your house, taking care of your kids. Your wife. The smile dropped from Robert's face. He straightened, some of the drunkenness clearing. What the hell are you talking about? Who are you? The people who found your family 4 days after you abandoned them. Marco stood on Robert's other side. Your son was crying on the side of the highway. Your daughter was hiding under a bed. Your wife was unconscious. Robert's face flushed red. That's none of your damn business. You made it our business when you left them to die, Sal growled from behind. The bar had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. Robert stood up, swaying slightly. He was tall, but so was Sal, and Sal was sober. I don't know who you think you are, but you need to get out of my face. Sit down, Vincent said quietly. Something in his tone made Robert hesitate. Vincent wasn't threatening. He was simply stating fact. Robert sat. Here's what's going to happen, Vincent continued. You're going to listen. You're going to listen to what your family went through while you were gambling away their food money in Atlantic City. You don't know. Your son is 9 years old. He found his mother unconscious. No food in the house. His sister coughing herself sick. He didn't know if his mom was dying. He didn't know where you were. He didn't even know if you were coming back. Vincent leaned closer. So he ran into a highway and begged strangers for help because he had no one else. Robert's face had gone pale. Lily, your daughter. Marco's voice was hard. She didn't speak for 2 days. Just stared at nothing. You know what her first words were after we showed up? She said, "You stayed." Because that's what she's learned about adults. They leave. I was going to come back, Robert said, but his voice was weak. I just needed some space. Some time to think. You stole $300, Polly said flatly. Money Claire was saving for Lily's medicine. You took it and ran. I was going to send money back. I just had bad luck at the tables. Stop. Vincent's voice cut through the excuses like a knife. Just stop. You're not coming back to that house. You're not going anywhere near those kids. Robert's eyes narrowed. They're my kids, my wife, my house. You can't stop me from going home. Actually, a voice said from the doorway, they can. Sheriff Coleman walked in, his hand resting on his belt near his gun. He was a weathered man in his 60s, someone who'd seen enough to know when to look the other way and when to step in. Sheriff, Robert said, relief flooding his voice. These men are harassing me, threatening me. That's funny, Sheriff Coleman said, not smiling. Because Dr. Martinez filed a report 3 days ago about child abandonment and neglect, and Patricia Morrison from CPS mentioned you by name. There's an active investigation, Robert. Robert's face drained of color. Now I could arrest you right now, the sheriff continued. Or you can make this easy. Sign over temporary custody to your wife, agree to supervised visitation only, and get yourself into a treatment program. You can't make me. No, but a judge can and will. Sheriff Coleman pulled out a folded paper. This is a restraining order. You stay 500 feet away from that farmhouse and those kids until you prove you're not a danger to them. Robert stared at the paper like it was a snake. Sign it, Vincent said quietly. Or don't. Your choice. But if you go near that house, if you try to see those kids, if you so much as drive down that road, we'll know. And next time we won't just talk. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Robert's hand shook as he took the pen Sheriff Coleman offered. He signed, his signature barely legible. Good choice, the sheriff said, pocketing the paper. Now get out of my town. Robert stood, looked at the men surrounding him, men who'd done more for his family in 3 days than he'd done in years, and something broke in his expression. Shame, maybe, or just the realization of what he'd lost. Tell Claire, he started. No, Marco cut him off. You don't get to send messages. You don't get to ask for forgiveness. You lost that right. Robert nodded slowly, grabbed his jacket, and walked out of the bar. They watched through the window as he got into his truck and drove away, taillights disappearing into the darkness. The bar erupted in whispers. Vincent turned to Sheriff Coleman. Thank you. The sheriff shrugged. Dr. Martinez is a friend. She told me what you boys have been doing out there. He studied Vincent with sharp eyes. I've known you and your crew for years. Caused me headaches more than once. But this, he nodded slowly. This is good work. Keep it up. As he walked out, Leo spoke up. What if he comes back anyway? Restraining order or not? Then we deal with it, Vincent said simply. But as they drove back to the farmhouse, Vincent couldn't shake the image of Robert Turner's face. Broken, ashamed, angry. A man who'd thrown away everything and was only now realizing what it cost. They pulled up at the farmhouse. Inside, the lights were warm. Through the window, they saw Claire laughing at something Ethan said. Lily was dancing with Frankie to music from an old radio. A family healing, growing, living. And they'd made sure the man who tried to destroy it couldn't come back and finish the job. It felt like victory. But something told Vincent this wasn't over yet. Patricia Morrison returned exactly 1 week later. Clipboard in hand, skepticism still etched on her face. What she found made her pause at the doorway. The farmhouse yard had been transformed. The weeds were cut. The porch was repaired and painted. Solar lights lined the pathway. Anthony's idea, paid for with money the crew pooled together. Through the window, she saw Claire at the kitchen counter, actually cooking. Real food. Chicken and vegetables, not canned soup. Inside, Patricia conducted her inspection with the same thoroughness as before, but this time the difference was undeniable. Lily's room had been painted pale yellow. There were curtains on the windows, handmade by a seamstress Leo knew who wanted to help. Books lined a shelf Sal had built. The little girl showed Patricia her new stuffed bear with pride. Sal won it for me at the carnival, Lily said, hugging it tight. He threw rings and won on his first try. Did he now? Patricia made a note. In Ethan's room, homework was organized on a desk Polly had refinished. A calendar on the wall showed check marks for chores completed, stars for good behavior. Structure, routine, stability. Patricia interviewed Claire again. How are you feeling, Mrs. Turner? Better. Claire's voice was stronger than last week. I started counseling. Dr. Martinez connected me with a psychiatrist to adjust medication costs based on income. I can actually afford it now. She paused. And I've been applying for jobs. Marco helped me update my resume. The businessman helped with your resume? He was a combat medic before. Claire caught herself. Before his current work, he knows how to make things look professional. She smiled slightly. He's been practicing interview questions with me. So have the others. Vincent makes me answer while he times me. Says I need to stop apologizing for everything. Patricia's pen hovered over her clipboard. And the children? How are they adjusting? Ethan's nightmares have stopped. He sleeps through the night now. Claire's voice caught with emotion. And Lily, she talks now. Full sentences. She tells me about her day. She laughs. Because of the men? Because we're not alone anymore. Claire met Patricia's eyes. I'm not saying they're perfect. Danny curses sometimes and has to put money in Lily's swear jar. Frankie is paranoid about everything. He checks the locks 5 times before he leaves. But they show up. Every single day. They're teaching Ethan to ride a bicycle. They're reading bedtime stories to Lily. They're helping me become the mother I should have been all along. Patricia interviewed the children next. Lily was animated, describing how Sal taught her to draw flowers, and Leo showed her how to whistle. Ethan talked about Danny helping with his math homework and Anthony teaching him about cars. Do you feel safe? Patricia asked Ethan. Yes, ma'am. What about when your father came back? Ethan's face grew serious. Vincent told us about it. Said Dad signed papers and can't come here anymore. Said we never have to see him unless we want to. He looked at Patricia directly. I don't want to. He hurt Mom. He left us. Vincent and the others. They're more family than he ever was. Outside, Patricia found Vincent and Marco working on the old barn, replacing rotted boards. Mr. Costello, can we talk? Vincent climbed down from the ladder, wiping sweat from his face. Is there a problem? That's what I'm trying to determine. Patricia consulted her notes. You've been here every day for a week. Your entire crew has been rotating shifts. Who's running your regular lives, your work, your responsibilities? We're managing, Vincent said simply. That's not an answer. Marco spoke up. I delegated some responsibilities. Anthony's handling things at night so he can be here during the day. The others adjusted their schedules. We made it work. For how long? Patricia's voice was sharp. A week is easy. A month is harder. 6 months? She paused. What happens when it stops being new and exciting, when it becomes tedious? When you have to choose between your own needs and theirs? Vincent met her eyes. Then we choose them. Words, Mr. Costello. Just words. No. Vincent's voice was firm. It's a promise, and I don't break promises anymore. Patricia studied him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She closed her clipboard. I spoke with Sheriff Coleman, with Dr. Martinez, with Mr. Leo's AA sponsor. She paused. Also ran background checks on all of you. Found some interesting things. The men tensed. 3 of you have prior convictions, 2 for assault, 1 for racketeering. That was you, Mr. Frankie. Patricia's voice wasn't judgmental, just factual. 4 of you have struggled with addiction. 2 have failed marriages with estranged children. You're not model citizens. You're not the kind of people the system typically trusts with vulnerable children. We know that, Marco said quietly. But, Patricia continued, you're also the only reason this family is still together. Claire's depression is being treated. The children are thriving. The house is safe and stable. And every single person I spoke with, from the sheriff to the doctor to the woman at the food bank, told me the same thing. These men showed up and changed everything. She opened her briefcase and pulled out papers. This is a formal agreement. The state will allow Claire to retain custody with ongoing monitoring. She gestured at the crew. We'll be listed as an approved support network. That means background checks for anyone who spends unsupervised time with the children. That means random visits from me. That means if anything goes wrong, you're all held accountable. Vincent stared at the papers. You're serious? I'm giving you a chance to prove me wrong about criminals with records. Patricia held out a pen. Don't make me regret it. 1 by 1, each man signed. Their signatures, some neat, some barely legible, represented a commitment none of them had ever made before. When the last signature was done, Patricia gathered the papers. I'll be back in 2 weeks, then monthly for 6 months. If everything remains stable, we'll reassess. She walked to her car, then turned back. Mr. Costello, for what it's worth, what you're doing here, it matters more than you probably realize. After she left, the men stood in silence. We really just signed up for 6 months of social worker visits, Frankie said finally. Yep, Vincent confirmed. Random checks, background investigations, the whole system watching everything we do, that's the deal. Frankie was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged. Worth it. Yeah. Sal rumbled in agreement. It is. That evening, they told Claire about the agreement. She cried. The good kind of tears this time. She hugged each of them. This broken woman and these broken men. All of them healing together. Ethan asked Vincent, does this mean you're staying? Really staying? Vincent knelt down to his level. Kid, we're not going anywhere. You're stuck with us. Ethan threw his arms around Vincent's neck, holding on like he was afraid to let go. And Vincent held him back, this boy who'd saved them as much as they'd saved him. Outside, the sun set over the farmhouse. The luxury SUVs sat in a neat row in the driveway. The lights inside glowed warm against the darkening sky. It wasn't perfect. There would be hard days ahead. Struggles, setbacks, moments when they'd want to quit. But they wouldn't. Because 5 criminals had made a promise, and for once in their lives, they were going to keep it. 6 months passed like chapters in a book nobody expected to read. The farmhouse that had once been a monument to abandonment and despair became something else entirely. The paint didn't peel anymore. The porch didn't sag. Flowers grew in boxes that Sal built, and Lily painted. A tire swing hung from the oak tree in the yard, Danny's handiwork tested thoroughly by Ethan before Lily was allowed near it. Claire got a job at the local library, part-time at first, then full-time when they saw how reliable she was. She'd gained weight, healthy weight, and her eyes had light in them again. She attended therapy every Wednesday. The men made sure she never missed an appointment. Lily started kindergarten. On her first day, she insisted on wearing her favorite dress, purple with flowers, and carrying the lunchbox Anthony had bought her. Sal walked her to the classroom, his massive frame barely fitting through the tiny doorway. The teacher's eyes went wide, but Lily grabbed his hand and announced proudly, "This is my Uncle Sal, he's the best." The teacher didn't argue. Ethan joined the school's science club. Vincent helped him with his projects, with Polly advising and shouting instructions about measurements and precision. The day Ethan won first place at the science fair, the whole crew cheered like he'd won the Nobel Prize. Patricia Morrison's visits became routine, monthly, then bi-monthly. Each time she came, she found the same thing: stability, progress, a family that was healing. On her final scheduled visit, she sat at the kitchen table with Claire, reviewing the case file. "Your depression is managed, you're employed. The children are healthy, attending school, showing no signs of trauma or neglect." Patricia looked up. "Mrs. Turner, I'm recommending case closure. You don't need state supervision anymore." Claire's hand flew to her mouth. "Really? Really?" Patricia allowed herself a small smile. "You did the work, you and your unusual support system." Outside, the unusual support system was teaching Lily to throw a football. She couldn't throw far, but she was determined, and every attempt was met with exaggerated enthusiasm from men who'd seen violence and prison, but acted like she'd just won the Super Bowl. Patricia watched through the window. "I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen a lot of outcomes, many of them bad." She closed the file. "This is the first time I've seen businessmen save a family. I wasn't sure I'd ever write these words, but they're good for you. For the kids?" Claire wiped tears from her eyes. "They saved us. All of us." "No," Patricia said. "You all saved each other." That night, Vincent called a meeting at the farmhouse. Everyone gathered around the kitchen table, the same table where they'd first found empty cupboards and desperation. "Patricia closed the case," Vincent announced. "Claire and the kids are officially stable, no more state supervision." Cheers erupted. Sal lifted Lily onto his shoulders. Ethan high-fived Marco. Claire laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. But Vincent continued, raising his hand for quiet. "I've been thinking. We stumbled into this. We found one kid on one road. But how many other kids are out there? How many other families falling apart with nobody to catch them?" The room went silent. "I'm not saying we can save everyone," Vincent said, "but we saved this one. And if we could do it once." He trailed off, letting them finish the thought. Leo spoke first. "You're talking about making this official, a real mission. I'm saying we've got something here. Resources, skills, a network. What if we used it?" Marco nodded slowly. "There are programs, organizations that connect volunteers with at-risk families. We could partner with them. We'd need structure," Polly added. "Maybe nonprofit status, funding. Can't do everything out of pocket forever." "I know a lawyer who owes me a favor," Frankie said. "Could help with the paperwork." Anthony pulled out his phone. "I'm already designing a logo. The Costello Foundation, protecting forgotten families." Vincent looked at Claire. "What do you think?" She smiled through tears. "I think you're going to change a lot of lives." 3 months later, the Costello Foundation held its largest charity event yet. Over 150 people gathered at a community center in town. Local news was there. Cameras, reporters, people who had once whispered about the dangerous mob guys now lined up with donations and support. At the front of the room, Vincent stood at a podium. But he wasn't alone. Ethan stood beside him, wearing a small suit that Leo had bought him. The boy's hand gripped Vincent's, his face showing confidence that hadn't been there 6 months ago. "You ready, kid?" Vincent asked quietly. "Ready," Ethan said. Behind them, the other men stood in a line, all in suits, all looking more legitimate than they ever had in their previous lives. A banner stretched across the stage. "The Costello Foundation, because every family deserves a second chance." Claire stood in the audience with Lily, who waved enthusiastically. The little girl was wearing a small dress, a gift from the foundation, with her name embroidered on a ribbon pinned to it. Lily Turner, Honorary Ambassador. Patricia Morrison stood nearby, clipboard free for once. She caught Vincent's eye and gave him a nod of respect. Sheriff Coleman stood by the door, wearing a slight smile. Dr. Martinez waved from the crowd. Even the town mayor had shown up to give a speech about community and redemption. The event would launch a program connecting volunteers with at-risk families in 3 counties, providing support, resources, and hope. But more than that, they were delivering proof that sometimes the people society writes off are the ones who show up when it matters most. Vincent stepped to the microphone. His voice echoed through the room, steady and strong. He thought about that day 6 months ago. A crying boy stumbling out of the trees, a desperate plea, a choice to follow when it would have been easier to drive away. That choice had changed everything. "All right, Ethan," Vincent said, gesturing to the boy. "Want to say a few words to everyone?" Ethan stepped forward, his voice small but clear. 6 months ago, I didn't know if my mom would wake up. I didn't know if my sister would be okay. I didn't know if anyone would help us." He looked up at Vincent. "Then I met these men, and they didn't just help us, they stayed. They kept their promise." The room erupted in applause. Vincent put his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Now we're going to keep that promise for other families too." The foundation launched with commitments from local businesses, donations from the community, and volunteer applications flooding in. A network that had started with one desperate boy on a highway was now growing into something that could reach hundreds of families. At the back of the room, Sal stood with Lily on his shoulders. Leo stood beside Marco, both of them sober and steady. Polly, Frankie, Danny, and Anthony formed a protective wall around Claire, who was crying happy tears. They weren't perfect. They still made mistakes. Some days were harder than others. But they showed up. They kept their promises. They did the work. Because one little boy had run out of the trees crying, "Please follow me home." And they had followed him into something bigger than any of them could have imagined. Into redemption, into family, into a mission that would echo through countless lives yet to be saved. The crowd dispersed into the night, but the impact they left behind, on Claire, on Lily, on Ethan, on a town that learned not to judge by appearances, on each other, that would last forever. Sometimes the people who save you aren't the ones you expect. Sometimes they're the ones everyone else gave up on. Sometimes they're criminals in expensive suits who hear a child crying and decide that this time, they're not going to drive away. This time, they're going to stay. And that makes all the difference.